This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Highball Graphics. For over 25 years, Highball Graphics has been providing high-quality decals for railroads in New England, Canada, and beyond. With over 2,000 sets in scales N through G, Highball Graphics has you and your project covered. Highball Graphics specializes in custom decal orders, serving freelance railroads worldwide. Check out their easy-to-use website at highballgraphics.com or email them at info@highballgraphics.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Coming to us from Paul Cassar's side of the international date line, from Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, Darren Lee. Darren, welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome. Yes, thank you for having me.
Oh, great to have you here. Been following along. You've been in the Around the Layout group and been posting away in our friends group and watching some of the action that you've been doing. And action, kind of one of the words. You had a model railway club of that same name over to your layout. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So my layout Wattle Flat was built purposely for the process of operations. So, and being as I've used it for quite some time now, I've wanted to be able to incorporate more people into or expose more people into operating sessions. So I hosted my local club, which is just around the road, the other week. And it was great. It was really enjoyable in the fact that a lot of those members have had no experience or no exposure to operating sessions at all. So therefore, they were all raw or green, for a better word, and they took to it like ducks to water, which was great. And we had a really good day. It was just an impromptu day that I put out to the members, and they had a ball.
Awesome. This was back on the 16th of March. And it is neat to bring people into the hobby and teach them operations, and kind of opens up a whole new world, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. Probably one of the biggest things is a lot of people misunderstand what operation and running trains is. And of course, our local club, which is just around the road from me, they have an expansive layout, but a lot of them just run trains. They just enjoy the camaraderie and running trains. Whereas my layout is the camaraderie, but at the same time, the trains actually do something. They've got paperwork that's required to undertake a task, and the guys, as I say, we're paired up in teams. I use a two-man crew situation. I let them go for it based on the instructions, and away they went. So they had a really good day, and the feedback that I got was, "Can we do it again? We've had a ball."
Yeah, that's the best compliment you can get, is the wanting to get back on the throttle and come back again. And then prior to that, I mean, you've been running, I think, quite a few I've seen, and you've posted in the friends group. But the other one I saw, you had your NMRA division there as well. Tell us about that operating session.
Sure. So I'm heavily involved with the Division 1 here in Australia, the Australian region as we call it. And we have a huge diverse range of members. Of course, a lot of people think that the NMRA is just for American modelers, but we have quite a few here that are all different prototypes and all different scales. And as I've been discussing operations with members over the years, a lot of them expressed an interest in wanting to come and operate on my layout because they'd seen others had operated and enjoyed themselves. So I put it out to a lot of them that hadn't operated either, and I said, "Yeah, come on down." And once again, we had a great day. We run 3 two-man crews, and then we stop for a bit of a break, and then run trains again or operate trains again. And so it was really good to be able to share with the fellow NMRA members just how operations works in a slow. My sessions are very different to other sessions in the fact that it's a country branch line theme in New South Wales, so therefore it's a quieter pace. There's no dispatcher. It's basically run on a sequential basis, and it's a lot more relaxed. So those that are fresh to operations really can get the opportunity to immerse in the situation and take it all in.
I was going to say, it sounds like a great opportunity to learn operations without getting too overwhelmed with operations and some of the more difficult level stuff. It's a good training opportunity that you've got there with your layout and sharing it with others and bringing others into operations. So kudos to you. And that's really cool. I'm glad you've been sharing those in the Friends of Around the Layout podcast group. And it's great to see. I mean, you do some great pictures. You got the group and got quite a few. How many folks do you get there for your operating sessions?
So a sweet spot is 6. I find that, and then if I do get a good turnout, I can run 8, which in effect I can run 4 trains at the same time. They start at different points on the layout, and those that have seen the pictures, it's basically a peninsula style layout, not really a shelf layout, although it is quite narrow in places. But in those peninsulas, I'm able to run a 2-person crew, so therefore they basically work their area and they cross each other. It's like a single line operation. So that gives them the opportunity to sort of get a feel for the layout. But then once they get into that particular area, they've got certain customers that need to be switched, the sidings and that sort of thing. And then they put their train back together and then make their way back to the point where they started from. And that basically finishes the session. Each train takes probably about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the operator's experience. And they, as I say, the reason for the 2-man crew is one operator holds the throttle, and the other person operates or holds the paperwork, and then they converse with one another, working out the ideas, scenarios, how they can actually get it done in the easiest possible way. Most of my operators have no railway experience whatsoever, no prototypical exposure other than standing trackside watching trains or what they see online. So it's very different to switching cars in that particular way as opposed to what you would see online.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a really good way. It's actually the way I learned how to operate. My first operating session was on a 2-man crew, and I was the green as can be guy. And I had an experienced guy with me, and he helped me start to learn the operations thing. And certainly nice that you have the opportunity again to share out your layout and be able to bring people in. And as I say that, and I'm kind of curious, what got you brought into the model railroad hobby?
Well, I'm not from a railway background whatsoever. My father and grandfather were carpenters. They worked with timber and that sort of thing. So at a young age, Mum and Dad bought me a battery-operated wind-up train set that was just on a little board, and it had toilet rolls for windmills and tissue boxes for tunnels and that sort of stuff. And I basically used it that often that it eventually stopped working. And then I graduated to a battery-operated set on the floor when I was 4, and then I basically wore that out. And then when I was 6, I remember waking up Christmas morning to the famous, and Tony Cook will like this, the Tyco Chattanooga. And you too, Ray, as I said, you've started
That's
with
right.
it, and I still have the original set. Although it's a replacement one because unfortunately the original one that I had got stolen. But I managed to source the Chattanooga set complete again with the caboose, steam engine, and all the paraphernalia that came with it. So I had that when I was 6, and my dad built me a 6x4 board that used to be up on the wall of my train room in the bedroom, and I used to fold it down over my bed, and I would run trains, and Mum would come in on a Sunday night and say, that needs to be folded away Monday morning so that I can wash the sheets. And if it's not folded away, then I will do it, and whatever's on top will end up on the floor. So it lived its life.
So was this thing, it was over the bed? I mean, did you leave it down? I mean, like, did you sleep under the layout? Is that how it kind of worked?
It was designed to fold up on the wall. It had like probably 6 inches between the wall and the board when it was folded up. So it allowed for room for buildings and bridges and so forth. But as I say, the idea was to fold it away when I wasn't using it. But, of course, it was always folded down and my bed was under it. So, yes, like you said, I would crawl into bed every night, and then Sunday nights I would put everything away, fold it up. Mum would come in and change the sheets on a Monday, and then I would come home from school on Monday and fold it back down again and live the week climbing into bed. So, and there's some wonderful memories of that particular layout.
Yeah.
So so from there, and I progressed for a very long time with that, and then I was lucky enough to be given a layout by the next door neighbours, and it was on a 8x12 board, and it took over the rumpus room, actually the family rumpus room, and my brothers never had any interest in the trains, but I basically took over that part of the room, and I built a spaghetti bowl, for a better word, with all my Tyco rolling stock. And I had many, many memories. And then after that, I was fortunate enough to be given a 12-foot by 10-foot garden shed. And as you know, here in Australia, there's no such thing as basements. We use sheds or spare bedrooms to build our layout. So I had this 12 by 10 garden shed, which I insulated inside, and then I progressed to build a peninsula layout in there, and that was in the mid 80s, and that was when I first discovered this magical stuff called Atlas. Sorry, yes, Atlas. So
Hmm.
I was fortunate enough to go to a hobby shop, and they had some Atlas rolling stock, and I purchased a Burlington Northern RS11, which I still have today, and it still runs like a Swiss watch. And I thought to myself, wow, where's this stuff been all these years? And so I kept the Tyco rolling stock and slowly converted it to KD. That was my first foray in learning to do things differently. The Tyco engines got put into the Rip Track, and I just started purchasing Atlas locomotives, and then went from there. And of course, unlike the average person in my teens, I never really give the hobby away. I still continued having the hobby as a very active part. I commenced in '87. We were fortunate enough to start a model railroad club very close to where I lived, and I was a founding member of that. And that club's still going today, 30 odd, '87, so quite some time. And I'm a life member of that club now, the Logan District Model Railway Club. And and then of course I moved out, bought my own home, and I had a spare bedroom which was devoted to a workbench and I guess a bit of a shelf layout, which is probably unheard of in the early '90s. And I basically went from there, and then I lived there for quite some time. Then I sold that place and moved out and built a shed, built a layout in there, got divorced. And then where I am currently now, I built another shed, and fast forward, I started that in 2010, and of course Wattle Flat is the culmination of years and years of work and dreams and memories, and that's what it is today, which what you see on the blog posts or on the Facebook posts.
Well, you unpacked quite a bit there, Darren. I want to go back and unpack a little bit more of this and dig in. 1997. Well, actually, let's go back a little bit further than that. In the mid 80s, you get a garden shed. How old were you when this garden shed was given to you?
I would have been probably 14.
When I grew up, it was a tree fort, right? That was kind of our thing, where I lived. It was like you get this like tree fort or, whatever. My sister had a dollhouse. I have a tree fort, and I never thought of putting a model railroad in it. And you're getting a shed about that same age, and now you've got a place and a purpose to do it. I just think that's a really neat thing to get at that age. Given a shed, here, go build a model railroad layout in it.
It was awesome because, as I said, I had been in the in the rumpus room, or I guess it's a rumpus room or like a family room is what it's called, similar to like a basement would be over there. And so it was good to get out of the house, and of course the rest of the family was happy to have that space back again. So being Dad was a carpenter. Yeah. Exactly. And we put a pool table in there, and it became more of a family, a lot more family room. Because Dad was a builder, he had access to a lot of materials, and that's where the shed came from. So I was able to line it. In those days, as I said, we didn't have the internet, so it was all what you read in Trains magazines, model railroad magazines from there. And I was a huge fan of Tony Custer and Alan McLennan, Bruce Chubb, and what they were doing with their layouts, that they weren't just layouts, they were operational layouts. They actually did something, and that was so inspirational to me back then. So when I had the opportunity to get rid of my spaghetti bowl in the house, I basically built a linear layout in the shed, which was only 300 wide with a loop and then a couple of crossing loops. And it was all DCC. It was all DC. With your cab control, two cabs, and I used to circle one train in one direction, nice and slow with that particular throttle, and then I would run like a Perway or a peddler freight in the opposite direction, and it would call into the different sidings and switch the customers coming in the opposite direction. And I spent hours and hours out there, and it wasn't until I left the home, and as I said, I got married in '92 the first time, and I left. That's when it finally got pulled down, and I have some great photos of it back in the days. But it was just great to have a place to go out and be out there and go from there.
That's awesome. And then, not too long after that, you said you married in 92 and you move, and then you start a model railroad club in 97. And I'm sorry, I missed the name of it when you initially said it. What's the name of the club?
So 87 was when we started the model railway club. Sorry. And it was the
87,
Logan.
okay.
Yeah, 87. No, that's right. Yeah. So Logan District Model Railway Club. And back in those days, but when we first kicked it off, it was called the Beenleigh District Model Railway Club. But then we changed it probably about mid-90s because it more reflected the area, the demographics of the area that we were working in.
How old were you when you started this club?
So I would have been 17.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, so there was an ad in the paper from a guy that lived locally saying, come along and be part of a club. And so I turned up. It was in the back of a fish and chip shop, and everyone said, "Let's go for this. This sounds great." And it just morphed from there basically. And a couple of the guys are still members today, and as clubs do, they come and go. But it's been a great learning curve for me. We've met so many different people. We have our own club rooms now and have done for quite some time. The club's just gone from strength to strength over the years.
So this club that, in 87, and was this your first kind of exposure to other model railroaders? I mean, you had the shed, you kind of had your own thing going. Was this kind of your first connection with other people?
So in the early 80s, about 84, we used to have a local show here in Brisbane, just the Model Railway show in Brisbane, which was the premier show for Southeast Queensland. And that was on in May every year for 3 days. So I was a member of an organisation similar to the NMRA, but it was called the Southern Cross Model Railway Association. It was based in Sydney, and they were very, very active down there. But of course, being in Queensland, not a lot happened up here. And of course, I'd never had a license, so I relied on mum and dad to sort of drop me off. But in a lot of cases, they'd drop me at the train station and I'd catch the train over and go from there, sort of thing. So so my exposure was basically through the exhibition in May every year. I would, save up all my pocket money, and mum would give me money for lunch, and I would go to the show and I would spend it all there. And I'd come home and she'd say, "What did you have for lunch?" And I'd tell her a fib, and but I actually bought trains with the money rather than eat lunch, if you know what I mean. So, so that was my exposure, and I was invited. I can remember being invited behind one of the layouts one year, and I was just absolutely gobsmacked because it was an operational kind of layout. And I still have the track plan today, surprise, surprise. But it was just great to be part of an exhibition. So then when our club was formed and we got together, we started basically working towards building exhibition layouts. So I think it was 87, 88 was the first exhibition layout that our club took to the show. And from then onwards, we just kept going to exhibitions and exhibiting.
Well, that's pretty incredible. Good early start. And like you said, you just kind of held on to model railroading all along right into your adulthood. And then being a part of the inaugural part of a club that's still going, that's a really neat thing to have in your model railroad resume.
As I say, it's a great bunch of guys. And before that, as I say, other than the show every year, I was a lone wolf. We didn't have, as I said, the internet. We didn't have any other contacts. I had no way of getting around. I lived about an hour out of town, so it was an effort to sort of get to some of these places. And so it was just basically doing it on my own and reading articles by the, as I call the famous guys over in the States. I just said to myself, I really need to get involved in this linear design rather than a tabletop with a big circular track on it, just chasing its tail. And then, of course, through the club, I met some great guys that I still am great friends with today, and they were into operations back in those early days. And interestingly enough, we look 20 years, 25 years on now, and we have our own layouts. A good mate of mine, Anthony Palmer, has his own layout called Border District. And we used to operate all them years ago together, thinking one day we will build our own operational layouts. And flash forward 25, 30 years, we both have fully operational layouts, and our dreams have come true, for a better word.
Yeah, it's definitely cool, the connections you make in that club environment. And boy, I've said it about 100 times and I'll say it again. when you get yourself out there, you connect with other people, and it just keeps that flywheel turning, and and it really starts to crank once you start to get good people involved, and they help turn your flywheel, you help turn theirs. It's keeps all that momentum going towards the dreams that you have in the hobby.
Absolutely. Well, a good mate of mine, Craig Mackey, once again, he has realised his dream of creating an operational layout casino, and he's just recently got his MMR through dispatches and so forth like that. So it's been over the years we've had this camaraderie, this bond that has just grown together. A good mate of mine, Jeff Burns, he built an exhibition layout, and we used my trailer and we carted it round to different exhibitions and travelled interstate and things like that. So it has it's been a lifestyle for me, as well as a coping mechanism and so forth.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you mentioned 92, you leave home, you've gotten married, and you have a room set aside with a workbench and a basically a switching layout. Tell us a little bit about it, because I think how switching layouts can be such a great entry and also a great holding point if you're in between layouts.
Absolutely. I was still honing my skills. I really was. Like, I'd had all this exposure, but other than changing KD couplings and wheel sets from plastic across, as we all know, the Tyco units had plastic wheels, so I was changing those, changing the couplings across, and then starting to work on some of the Atlas locomotives that were missing some of the finer details. I was sort of playing along those lines, still in the DC days, of course. But when I left the home and moved into our new home, obviously the layout came out of the garden shed, but there was a small panel which was basically 12 inches wide by about 9 feet. So that was able to come out, and I put it in the shed and put a workbench underneath it. And come out of the shed and went into the new house, and I put a workbench underneath it, and that gave me somewhere to tinker, somewhere to escape. And I had a lot of fun there in that respect. Obviously, I was very close to the club still, so I was able to get down there on a regular basis. We had our Tuesday night get-togethers. We'd finish work, and you'd go straight to the club. You'd take some sausages and bits and pieces, and you'd all have a barbecue, and at about 6:30, and then from then, those that couldn't make the barbecue would all turn up, and from 7 o'clock onwards till about 9:30, we'd all just sit around talking and run some trains, and it was such a social atmosphere. And then we'd go home, and the following Tuesday, you couldn't wait to do it again, sort of thing.
You hinted in there a little bit of therapy and stuff, and I don't want to get too big. You hinted that you did get divorced, and I think it also is a powerful thing for that, though, of during tough times. And I'll share personally, when I had tough times, model railroading was certainly there for me. And between model railroading and rail fanning, I think those were the two things that carried me through. And it sounds like you had kind of a similar story there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It was the camaraderie that I was able to go down with the club. It took me away from the day-to-day pressures of life. And it just, you weren't trying to suppress them or anything. You were just merely using me as a break, and it was great. The guys, you had someone to talk to, you had someone to share your rail fanning experience, or going to an exhibition or to a show. You were sharing that with people, and it was just it was there for you the whole way through, the whole time. And I can't thank some of the fellas enough to have someone just to chat to, but to be able to share with. And it was interesting listening to Tim the other week when he had his, and he went through the same thing as me, and I just sat there and I just thought it so resonated with me, and to see that the place he's in now and what he's accomplishing, and I've done the same thing, and I just thought this podcast that you do, Ray, is more than just an interview with model railroaders. It's also about getting to know people on the other side of the world, and I've met some and spoke to some absolutely amazing people, and it's been another kind of therapy that you can't explain.
Yeah, it definitely is building the network and meeting new people. And I guess what it is the ability to relate, right? To be able to find people that are relatable. Hey, this guy's like me, or, sounds like a very familiar story, and it makes you feel, part of their story.
It resonated.
Yeah, exactly. It resonates, and it's kind of the accidental thing I found with the podcast, right? I mean, I just kind of, okay, we're going to meet a bunch of people. We're going to talk model railroading and, get to learn their story, but then you really learn their story. It's not just, I went from this layout to that layout to this layout to this club. It's, the human stuff that's in it. So a lot of fun to be able to, find like people and hear their stories. So yeah, it's definitely need to relate.
One thing I find so interesting is that, there's so much so different. Model railroading in North America is very different to in Australia. But I found it so interesting to think that so many people that you've interviewed, and yourself included, all started out with a Tyco Chattanooga set. And I'm thinking, modelling in Australia was so different, but yet we've all had the same story. I started with a Tyco set, and it's taken me where I am today. And I just think, there's a little cliche that we've all shared.
Well, I keep learning things on the podcast, and tonight I learned the Chattanooga Choo-Choo is worldwide. I thought it was just a U.S. thing. This thing, the Chattanooga, goes around the globe, so that's very cool to hear.
Absolutely. I can remember the smoke and the whistle, and it was just, amazing memories.
Yeah. Glad you were able to get another one. I still have mine from when I was a child, so it's sitting in a box now. It definitely is deserving of at least a place on the wall, and I got to work on getting that done amongst the other projects I've got going to get that on display. A lot of great memories there for sure.
Mine's in a glass display case, and I think I posted a photo of it some time ago on the Facebook group of ATLP, and it's just showing that it's on a pride of place in the display case under my layout.
That's great. Getting back to these memories, so again, you've gotten past the divorce. What goes next? What's next in the story of Darren Lee's model railroading journey?
So, and this is the twist of it all is, as I say, I was a North American modeler through and through. I had as Burlington Northern, the Illinois Central area, and the Kansas City area. All the major railroad players, from my knowledge back in those days, all came into play. So, I basically, that was my area, and I collected stuff that sort of had a believability to it. I never wanted to actually model a Class 1, as we call them now. They certainly weren't referred to as that back in the 80s. But I sort of started collecting stuff that was seen in an area. But of course, when I got married the first time, unbeknownst to me, my father-in-law was actually an engine driver for the New South Wales Government Railways, and in those days was called the State Rail Authority. And so I was very lucky in the fact that I only had that little switching lane at home, but I now had a father-in-law who I got on very well with, and I was able to go to work with him. And a good mate that I also met through the Logan Club, a good mate. He was also a driver at the same locomotive depot here in Queensland as my father-in-law. So I was fortunate enough to spend most weekends in the cab of a locomotive or at a servicing facility servicing locomotives, or in a classification yard or a marshalling yard, making up trains ready to go for a rundown in the train. So while I didn't get much done on my own layout or my own stuff, I spent a lot of time in prototypical cabs and engines and fueling locomotives and servicing. And back in the 90s, it was quite easy to wander into a rail yard and go up to the chargeman and say, "G'day, how you going? I just want to take some photos." And they were like, "Yeah, okay, just don't get hurt, and let me know when you're gone." But of course, as I said, I had a window of opportunity with the father-in-law at the time, and my good mate, who were still good mates today, Greg. And so I was able to do that sort of thing. So that changed my modelling. I went from being a North American model to a New South Wales modeler. And so things changed quite dramatically in that area there. I still have my North American stuff, but hence my home layout is New South Wales now. And so I used that particular time frame to amass quite a large collection of New South Wales rolling stock. And then I obviously used the skills that I'd learnt through the North American stuff to kit build, kit bash, and then make stuff that wasn't necessarily available, unlike it is today. And then go on from there. So that's basically what I did for that particular time frame. I was married for over 13 years that first time, and as I said, never had a home layout other than the shelf layout, and then the start of one in the new house. And then of course I got divorced, and I met my new wife, and we built a home where we are now. And I built a shed which is 9 meters by 6 meters, or 30 feet by 20 feet. That room was built purposely for an operational layout.
Wow. I want to go back a little bit. I mean, obviously, any influence like that of being able to have direct access to in cabs and with through your father-in-law and your friend there for the New South Wales. And that would definitely turn me, towards a railroad for sure. That's quite an influence. But I'm kind of curious before that, what was the influence to do North American railroads?
Well, there wasn't a lot of New South Wales around. Basically, we've got different railway systems here in Australia. So we've got Queensland, which is 3-foot 6 gauge, and New South Wales, which is 4-foot 8.5. So I only had a little bit of exposure to Queensland other than going to school and rail fanning in the local area. Mate and I in the late 70s, we used to just ride our bike into town, jump on the train and go for a train ride somewhere and then come back again. And that's what we did. But it wasn't really until I met my father-in-law, as I say, that I really got involved in it. But North American stuff here in Australia was prolific. It was everywhere. All the hobby shops carried it. And there was, as I say, there were companies like Barkman. Pemco was another manufacturer. There was always a Thurn Blue Box. And then you had Mahana Technica, AHM, and a lot of manufacturers, but it was all very prolific. And all the hobby shops over here, even your Kmart's and that sort of stuff, they stocked that sort of thing. So it was just naturally progression. I was into trains. I really enjoyed it, and I went down the path of buying what suited my era, and went from there. That's why I was an American modeler.
I've only been tempted once to model Australian railroading, and that's only after our good friend Paul Cassar built on his North American railroad a trailer park. I think that's how Paul thinks America looks like. So my threat was I was going to build an Australian railroad with kangaroos and, a whole bunch of Paul Hogan looking figurines all over the place, and just say, maybe an Outback Steakhouse or somewhere on the layout or whatnot to get back at Paul. But now it really does fascinate me that, Australians modeling the North American, scene. And, I know Paul's been over here. Have you been to the United States? Have you had an opportunity to see any North American railroading?
I haven't. I haven't been to the States. My first trip is actually this year in August. I fly to New York, and then we hop on a cruise ship and go to Iceland. But so it's my first chance, and I've got a couple of days in New York to have a bit of a look around. And I'm really hoping to catch up with a couple of model railroaders while I can. My wife is supportive of that, which is good. She just threatened me that make sure you get on that cruise ship, otherwise you'll be dead. And
do not miss the ship.
Yeah, because they'll go without you. Don't you worry.
That's right.
Absolutely. So this is my first opportunity. But since COVID and being involved with NMRAX and a lot of other online groups and that sort of, I've met some amazing people. So. But as I said, I've always been interested in North American theme, and the ability, the interchange concept is something that it just doesn't happen here in Australia. We don't have little short lines that cart from here to there. And so that was something that always took my interest in the early days, and I guess that's why. But it was just the availability, which was why most people here in Australia modeled North American.
Yeah. And so when you start and you decide, okay, I've been influenced by my father-in-law and I got to do this now that I've had all this access, and, you've fallen in love with the Australian railroading and you're going to model it. As you start to develop the Wattle Flat, was that your first run at Australian railroading?
So I was lucky enough that just before I got divorced, I built myself an exhibition layout. So I wanted to test the waters, and I hadn't built a layout of my own for quite some time. I've been involved, as I said, with the clubs and working on club layouts. But clubs are very different to your own because you can do things your own way. You've only got yourself to report to for a better way of thinking. So I built an exhibition layout with the concept that I wanted to try all the skills that I'd had the chance to do and do it as myself, and just basically drag it around the country and go from there. So that was I built a little exhibition layout which was 3.6 meters by 2.4. So in the old money, that's 8 meters by just over 10 feet. And it was 4 pieces. It used to slide in the back of my van that I had, and I said a couple of good mates that I had from the Logan Club. We got together, Jeff Burns and myself, and we travelled around going to different shows. So that really got me back into learning my own layout, and that was the impetus for Wattle Flat that I have now. Although a different era, Wattle Flats modelled in the mid-70s when country branch lines were still very much an important part of railway transportation. So therefore, there was a lot of operation, a lot of trains, did a lot of work in those days. So whereas my exhibition layout more was based on the stuff that I had the privilege to be able to drive and service and fuel in the 90s. So it was basically a direct replica, the 90s versus the 90s sort of thing. So I had a lot of fun with that. But of course, at exhibitions, my layout was built to stand out the front and operate, which is a lot of things. Back in those days, most people stood behind their exhibition layout and didn't really engage with the public too much. I wanted to stand out the front and run the trains. They basically just circled around and showed off what I'd done. But I was able to converse with the public and say, there's more to the hobby than just buying and collecting. You can actually do something. You can customize this and so forth like that. So Jeff and I, we had a lot of fun doing that. And then Jeff built his own layout, which was a split of Swamp Creek, and that was hand-laid track and hand-laid turnouts. And that was another journey we went down at the same time, where we went around the country and were invited to a lot of nice places and met a lot of wonderful people to share the hobby with.
Quite the ambassador you are, to be able to share all this out, and the mindset of being with the people and telling them about it and encouraging them. That's a phenomenal thing for you to do.
Well, I mean, the hobby's been very good to me. There's a lot of places I've been to where I haven't had to put my hand in my pocket because the exhibition vendors have paid for us to come, paid for our accommodation to be there, and as I said, so put us up. So Jeff and I have been to a lot of places in country New South Wales where we would not have necessarily been, or we would have had to pay to go to. So as I say, that was my way of giving back. And now, as I say, we're hosting operating sessions and being part of NMRA clinics and doing presentations, as I did in last year's NMRA seminar in Sydney, giving back to the hobby that's been so giving to me over the years.
Yeah, for sure. And you were giving back in a great way, getting people into the hobby and encouraging them. That's awesome. And teaching them how to operate, which is even cooler. So good for you. So your layout, Wattle Flat. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the name, what that represents?
Sure. So you guys freelance model over there, which we also call over here prototypical freelancing. Now, most of the people that you've had on recently have all talked about it, and that's exactly what I am, is a prototypical freelance modeler. But the important part about prototypical freelancing is believability. It always has been in my eyes. So when I created Wattle Flat, I needed a branch line that was not necessarily built. So I used a branch line that was proposed to be built. The railways were going to build this particular line, but they never did. So I needed a location, but I also needed a name that gave that country sort of feel. Now, wattles grow prolifically here in Australia. They're a pest in some places. And flat is basically just a lot of flat country here in Australia. And basically, I put the two together. I was on holidays down in Bathurst, which is a great railway town, and I was heading up through Gold Country, through Sofala and places. And I came through a little place called Wattle Flat, and I was on holidays with the family at the time. We were forward driving. And I went and I just wrote, and as you do, you write things down and making notes. And of course, the layout hadn't even been started, but of course, it was being planned. And I thought, I quite like that. And I didn't want to have Wattle Creek or all that sort of stuff because sometimes people go, well, where's the creek? And and in those days, I didn't have the experience to model a creek. So I thought, well, I don't want to be forced to have to build a creek and then do a botched up job of it. So I went, well, Wattle Flat sounds quite good. So that's where the name came from. And the concept was basically, as I say, it's a cross-country line in central New South Wales that was never built, but I used town names that are in the area to give the feel of why it's there for what the reason is. It's predominantly a wheat growing area, so therefore it relies heavily on the wheat service that runs backwards and forwards and clears the silos. And then from there, when you've got a prosperous towns that run on wheat, they have cattle, sheep, and then all your produce, so you've got your fuels, your heavy fuels, your light fuels, and so forth from there. So it gave me the opportunity to make a believable country branch line. And of course, the other thing too is in country New South Wales, a lot of these places only saw one train a week now, or maybe 3 trains a week and that sort of thing. So to run an operating session, now I live about an hour from the Gold Coast, an hour and a half from the Gold Coast, an hour and a half from Brisbane, but most of my operator demographics come within half an hour away. but I didn't want them to turn up after driving all that way to run one train and then go, well, that was it. The operating session's over, and it's time to go home after we have a cuppa and a feed. So I thought I needed to make it believability at the same time to be able to run some more trains. So I used the information from other branch lines to be able to create the believability of a prototypical freelance layout.
That really is a kind of a neat, way of going about it. It kind of reminds me of like John Parker's approach, where John Parker did the Fall River division. He uses BNSF, but he basically created a layout, kind of like the best of both worlds or best of all worlds kind of thing, where he was able to incorporate the things you want. You really kind of did the Australian version of that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about the North American freelancing is that, as I said, the believability is there as well, because the fellas have gone through, or the guys have gone through and actually taken the research from A and column B and put it into C, and then created the backstory as well at the same time. So it's not only freelanced, but the believability is there. And that's a big thing to me. I really like that, the believability. If people walk into your layout room and it's because the common thing is we all say in the hobby that there is a prototype for everything. But the more of the unregular stuff that you see that you put into a layout, the less believable it comes. Yes, there is that you can see it in the real world, but the more of the gimmicks, I suppose, for a better word, the less believable it comes, and it can detract from your hard work. And as I say, the guys over in the States have done an amazing job in creating the believability of their prototypical freelance layouts.
So as you have this blank canvas basically in front of you, you've kind of, written, what the name's going to be and what it's based on. What were some of the things you just absolutely had to have on this layout as you're designing it?
When I was able to buy the block of land and my wife and I built the house, we lived in the shed, and I created a room inside the shed. The actual shed is 18 metres by 15 metres, so it's huge. But inside that shed is the 30 feet by 20 foot railway room, which is insulated and all that sort of thing. So I created that space. We lived in that space while we saved up to build the house, and then we built the house. And once again, but I knew that was always going to become the layout room. So I was lucky in the fact that because I knew the space, I created bench work that was going to give me nice wide aisles, because I knew it was always going to be operational. So I wanted to have nice wide aisles. So I actually drew out the bench work, maximized the bench work in the space. I needed a crew lounge, I needed a workbench, and so forth. So I drew the bench work out and got that all happy. And I went, right, what am I going to build on the bench work now to maximize the space? So it's kind of back the other way. A lot of people, work out their track plan and then try and get the bench work to sort of go from there. So I'd done that. And then I said, right, I need it to be believable, as I said, have that plausibility to it. So then I went down and I looked at prototypical track plans that the railways actually use themselves. And so I actually then incorporated those and then used, so every location on the layout is based on a prototypical location somewhere in New South Wales. I then joined them all together, and then I created the scenario, the operating scenario to suit. Signature-wise, because it was country, I knew I needed to have grain facility, I needed to have fuel facility, I needed to have stock facility, or sheep and cattle were the two prominent things in country New South Wales. I needed what they call sheds that would cart boxed items or community items. So therefore, you have what we call, you call them box cars over here, we call them Luva vans. So I needed those. So there was those 5 industries basically that had to be on the layout in some particular places. Now, because the layout's linear design, there's quite a large run between each town, and I have quite high backdrops. So when you're standing on one side of a peninsula, you actually can't see the operator on the other side. So when you're working in one area, you actually don't know what's going on in the other area on the other side. So you're actually locked away in that particular area doing what you need to do. So it feels like you are, a couple of 100 kilometres away from the next person, sort of thing. So each town, there's 3 towns on the layout. There's North Golgong, there is Wattle Flat, and then there's Gulma. And they're the 3 towns that have the predominantly and most amount of work, and they have industries accordingly. One has a feedlot, and what it does is it makes waste feed for the feedlots. It then makes things like muesli bars and cereals and granolas and all that sort of stuff as well. So they're the three major towns that have their own dedicated trains, and then there's the grain train that runs around and sort of stuff from there. So the must-have industries were those ones that I mentioned.
What's your favorite industry on your layout?
I'd have to say it's the simplest one of them all, and that would be it's the Golden Cannery kit by Walthers. And it's basically I've kit bashed it. I've taken the roof off and put a corrugated iron roof on it and painted it and weathered it and put a new dock on it and so forth. So it's the classic kit bash, and it services 2 cold store wagons, and it's just a meatworks. It's a simple little switch. You just simply switch it on the way out, drop 2 wagons in, drop 2 wagons out, and away you go. It takes probably 15 minutes at the absolute most to switch it. But it was more fun to build because I took a North American kit, and it just looks like some a cold store building in country New South Wales made out of brick and corrugated iron.
You said you've got a background in carpentry. Am I right in that?
So yeah, Dad was, and my grandfather was. So, and I work in the hardware industry now. So access to timber, soft pines and hard pines and so forth was very easily. A lot of my layout was built with throwaway timber that the hardware industry uses packing. So I was fortunate enough. Dad taught me a lot, and I've built 2 homes myself, and managed the 3rd build, which we live in today. So timber construction work and building layouts, that's probably the easy part for me. Scenery is an uncontrolled environment. You can spread it out over the layout, but it's not until you start hitting it with glue and water that you go, that's not working, I need to start again.
Well, it's carpentry must be something in your blood and in building, because anybody that builds bench work and then figures out a track plan to the bench work they built, like you said you did, I mean, you must that must have been the exciting part for you, was to get the bench work up.
It was a lot of fun in that respect, because I had access to a lot of inch-by-inch steel. So I actually created, because the layout is 1350 high, 1315 millimeters high. I can't think of that in imperial. But so it's designed to be stood at, to be operated. You walk around the layout following your train, and then I have bar stools in strategic locations if you have to sit and wait for something to happen. So it was built on adjustable legs. And then the frames were put on top of the steel legs, and it was designed to be able to be pulled apart if I did ever have to move from here. And so I had to think about what I was doing beforehand, and then I just simply only have ply sheeting across where the track work is. Everywhere else is open grid, and then I just infilled that with the good old cheap and nasty white styrofoam.
When you talked about that Walthers kit and you had to kit bash it, I'm thinking Walthers has a lot of these kits. I know they build a lot of North American type kits. When you go to use those, what are some of the changes you have to do to make it Australian looking? What changes have to be done to that in the kit bashing process?
So one of the first things I'll look at is how much corrugated iron is in the kit. So the Walthers did the Big River mine kit, which has got a huge amount of corrugated iron in it, which most of Queensland, New South Wales buildings here and country towns are all out of corrugated iron. So if the kit's got corrugated iron in it, or it looks like it can be replaced with corrugated iron, then it's a big win. So I made a big warehouse with the Northern Rivers mine kit, because there was so much corrugated iron. I actually cut the bottom level down and used that to make awnings and so forth. So the interstate oil kit that they did with the curved roof, I simply cut the curve off and then I put a hip roof over it. So basically, a lot of it, I did a Tyco kit, which was a little foundry kit. I put that recently up on my blog, and I took the roof off that and put a corrugated iron roof on it and a veranda on it. So a lot of times, basically, all you need to do with a North American kit is just simply change the roof type to a corrugated iron, and it will certainly then weather accordingly, and it will give that Australian look.
How is availability for other Australian type things? Obviously, your locomotives and rolling stock. You mentioned early in the hobby, you went by North American, a lot of the availability. How is it nowadays to be able to find stuff that you're looking for?
I've said it once before, and we're in the golden age of this hobby. Anyone who we have a company here, Oxygen Models, a good mate of mine, Aaron Denning, and he works for them down there. Like we don't wish for any. Well, everyone wishes for something more, don't they? But
Sure.
everything is just so readily available. A lot of the guys down here have taken the 3D printing by the horns, and they have just run with it. I don't wish for anything because it's all available quite
Yeah.
easily, yeah. So. And it's only going to get better. It really is. Yes, it's expensive. A lot of this stuff. I'm a big fan of pre-ordering. I do a lot of pre-ordering in the event that, as I say, because I know it's going to come out and I know it's going to sell out. So yeah, we're very lucky.
It's amazing to me. I'll share a little quick story personally, inside and outside of model railroading, just the availability of what's become easy access to custom, right? Even that, like even if you want something very particular, if you dig hard enough and you find the right person, you're going to be able to find it. I'm a former roller hockey goalie, and I've hung it up now, but my goal masks are really nice. One's painted, one's vinyl wrapped. And I said, they're sitting in the basement. I want to hang them up. So I ordered hooks for them from a guy who 3D prints hooks. And I was like, I got them both. And I didn't realize the second mask that I have has a different style strap system, so the hook wouldn't work. So I reach out to him and I said, oh, by the way, it won't work for a sport mask. He goes, measure it up, send me dimensions. I'll print something out for you. Yeah. And I mean, within 3 days, I'm holding it up. Nobody else will be able to see it, but Darren, but I've got a custom printed hook. It's like, yes. in model railroading is the same thing. It's like, I'm having problems with a switch on my layout. Well, send it off to Jeff Otto at Oak Hill. I traced out as he instructed. He's going to build me a wire that's going to fix the problem. It's amazing. It's absolutely a stunning thing in our hobby that you dream it or you just ask enough people and you can get your hands on it.
That's right. The sharing is the other thing too. People will happily draw something for you and either put it out there for free on Thingiverse is one of the places that you get a lot of 3D things. But as I say, there's so many people that are so prolific at it, and they will draw it up for you and say, there you go, there's the STL file. If you've got access to a 3D printer, print it out yourself, or someone else will print it for you for a couple of bucks.
So you are absolutely right, Darren. Yeah, golden era of model railroading, and it just, I don't know how you could complain. The hobby is just going through this amazing evolution where things are, beyond the old Chattanooga choo-choo. We're in this entirely different realm of things.
Absolutely. But it's not just, it's that as well, but being able to share with the, as bad as COVID was, it has really pushed a lot of us to the online to be able to share what we're doing together, to sit down like at the workbench and listen to podcasts and then resonate with people and all that sort of. It really, as I say, it really is the golden era, and a lot of younger people are really embracing this type of technology, and then they're coming along and. I saw you on a YouTube pod, or I saw your Facebook post, or how you going? I met a young bloke in Sydney when I was at the NMRA convention presenting last year, and a young Ben, and he was a lone wolf. He'd come on his own, and I just went up to him and I said, "G'day, how you going?" And he goes, "Do I know you?" And I went, "No, but I was a young bloke like you once, and I felt like alone and that sort of stuff." Anyway, we've spoken a number of times online. Through Messenger and that sort of stuff, or he's commented on a post or whatever I've done. And I just think, it's definitely the golden era, and it's only going to get better. It's exciting.
It really is. It's we're in a very good place, and we've got very good people like you in the hobby that are willing to share what they've learned and then use your layout as an ability to teach people about operations, which again, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, operations just opens up so many new doors to be able to connect and go to layouts and participate in layouts, and really gives your layout a whole lot of meaning too. It gives it purpose. So definitely you're doing great things there, Darren, and it's certainly been great to have you here on the podcast to tell your story. But before we wrap it up, why don't we put a little bit more onto the Wattle Flat? Tell me, where do you, obviously you're operating it, you're having operating sessions. What percentage of complete would you call it?
I'd say it's probably 95. In that respect, there's just a lot of the super detailing now. Fencing, split post fencing. I actually use a matchstick and I slice it in half with a razor, and then I slice that half into half again, and then the other half into half again. So I actually get 4 posts out of a matchstick, and they look like a typical split post that we use out in the country. So that takes a while to do. I stain them all up. So that's a big project. And of course, the country branch lines were fenced and some weren't. But of course, it's the boundary fences, and that's probably taking the biggest amount of time, is actually planting the fence posts. I like a lot more trees, and I like the hand-built nature of trees. So that's twisting up wire and that sort of thing. Maintenance is probably the biggest thing that I spend more time doing on now, is just keeping locomotives operational, because they get used quite a bit. Because in between operating sessions, I actually use the layout myself, which is great. I actually get to restage the layouts. Parts of it are restaged during a session because they're self-staging. But others, the trains terminate and they need to be run back out again and replaced back into their positions. That's enjoyable for me. I get to sit back and relax and just run a train at my pace, which is what I do. Because during an operating session, I actually don't operate the layout at all. I actually stand back and I just admire and watch the operators operate the layout, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. So that's my chance to operate, is in between the operating sessions, and or I'll run a few trains and put a few YouTube videos up. I've been doing a few of late, and I quite enjoy just kicking back and running the trains there. So, but I'd say 95% roughly.
Does it ever get beyond 95% ever? I mean, are we ever really done?
I honestly don't think we are, because, as I say, with the advent now of 3D printing, there is so many things. Like, look at what Mini Prints is bringing out now. A lot of that stuff is just it's universal anywhere in the world, that sort of thing. So as I say, that needs to be printed or purchased and then painted and put on the layout. There's little sheds that oil drums. You look at a lot of like fuel depots and places where locomotives are serviced and that sort of stuff. There's a mountain of detail that could go there. We only touch the surface of what we put in there. I look at mine and it's the same. It's only got a small amount of detail. And having worked in and serviced locomotives and changed brake blocks and so forth like that, I know what should be there and what's missing. It's just,
Amazing. Again, you can dream it up, and if you see it, you can think of it. It can be done and be added. And I don't know if a layout ever gets done until we're done, right? And then it goes away. So I think that's about the time it's 100%, but just before it goes to 0% again. So
that's exactly right.
Darren, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you tonight on Around the Layout and getting to know your story. And I look forward to having you back here in the near future. We'll talk more about the Wattle Flat and all the other adventures that you're having over there on Down Under.
Down Under. And it's been my pleasure, Ray. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.